Welcome to our Backyard Brothers podcast. We are talking mostly football today, but we have a couple of topics thrown in there that touch on other things. For example, let me mention right now that the MLB baseball season playoffs start next week on Tuesday of next week. So next week's podcast will be largely built on baseball playoffs. Not entirely, but a lot of it will be about predictions and ongoing analysis and things like that. We may have a guest next week. We haven't heard yet. Our resident expert Bob usually joins us for baseball stuff. May or may not next week. We will see about that. We are going to and as you may see, we're short a brother just for a few minutes. He's putting a kid to sleep right now, and if he's anything like my kid, he'll fight it for hours and hours and hours. But I don't think anyone is as bad as my kid. So we have a memory today, thanks to Yancey. So Yancey, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, we're gonna go more of a bio than a memory. We're gonna talk about Forrest Griffin. Anytime I get the chance to talk about MMA with you guys or any other person with a heartbeat and two ears, really one, if you can hear me or not is irrelevant. I'll talk MMA with you. And I think Forrest Griffin was one of the fighters when I was younger. Watching him fight made me feel like I might not be the most talented at this or whatever, and I may not be number one in the world, but I could do this. Like watching Forrest Griffin and the way he talked about MMA and himself really resonated with me as a person. So I just want to talk about him a little bit and what he did for the sport, in the sport. And then I'll bounce it over to you guys to just kind of to see what you come up with whenever you were doing your research or what you feel about the guy himself. So Forrest Griffin fought at 205. He was on the Ultimate Fighter for the first season, the one that really took it off, the one that Dana White and the Fertitta brothers ended up paying for. Basically, if it was make or break for the UFC, if this reality TV show about MMA didn't take off, it was going to be a problem. Forrest Griffin, fun fact that not everybody knows, fought that entire season, so it was 3 fights and then the main event. So 4 fights with a broken forearm. He had broken his forearm before the show, hadn't got it fixed, fought the entire show with a broken forearm, won the show with a broken forearm. Well, the fight actually ended in a draw, I think, but everybody won watching that fight. And he went on to actually win the light heavyweight championship, defended it once or twice and then lost it. But he blew his knee out twice in the span of 8 months, I think. And that's kind of what was the downfall of his career. But during his career, he was really fun to watch. You couldn't watch Forrest Griffin in a boring fight. I don't think I ever seen a boring Forrest Griffin fight. And one of his favorite quotes that always resonated with me was, "I'm not the best. Watching my fights, it's not going to be the prettiest or the most technical thing, but I'm a dog and I love to fight. And I'll go out here every time and fight for you guys if you're willing to watch me." And I always thought, man, that's cool. That's a cool way to think about the sport. Because it's like, yeah, if you're going to play football, you might not be Peyton Manning, but there's a role for everybody in the thing you do. And if the thing you do is cage fighting, well, it is all on you. You can't rely on your teammates to be the stars. But to just say, you know what, I might not be the greatest, but I'm going to go out here and show what I got no matter what every time, was always kind of my mentality of like, dude, I don't care. This is to the death, bro, for me. I don't know what you feel like. And I always felt that sense of urgency from Forrest Griffin in his fights. And that's why I chose him for my bio and why I wanted to talk about him for a bit.
Cool. Yeah, not being as indoctrinated into UFC and fighting and things like that. I had to do my research, and I learned a lot of cool stuff. You see these athletes, baseball, football, basketball, whatever sport it is. Most of these guys have been Excuse me. Wow. Most of these guys have been playing the sport or doing training for the sport literally their entire lives. And that's not the case for Forrest Griffin. He was a police officer in the city of Augusta, Georgia, for years and years before he got into fighting. And so there's something about that that strikes different and strikes a different kind of chord and strikes almost more respect that in as he's an adult he decided to start learning the sport. I mean, he may have done other things before that, but really getting into it. And so that resonated with me as someone who made a career change when I was an adult. And what that kind of does, and how you really have to start at the bottom. I started as an intern when I was 28 years old, so like it's different. And so I really respect that and appreciate that. And then not only that, but then he becomes the the best fighter in the world. And so that's dedication. There's certainly some natural born talent, but there's a lot of just can do, will do, and won't stop until I do uh, kind of mentality there that I really appreciate. And then reading more about the fight that you were mentioning there with in the Ultimate Fighter first season there, that fight or that show in particular, widely credited, as it said, with sparking the success of the UFC. So it really comes back to him, and so that was important to see. That was cool for me to read and to learn a little bit about this guy that some can trace the success of the UFC back to what he has done.
Shout out to the other half of that fight, Stephan Bonner. He's dead, but shout out to that dude. He was crazy when he was alive, but shout out.
Yeah, good bio. I think the only thought I have to add on this is just think about all these different sports, and a lot of these sports have a figure that's kind of a foundation of where the sport then grew to success. With basketball, you think someone like Bill Russell. Baseball, you think Babe Ruth. It may be true to say Forrest Griffin being one of those foundational players for combat sports, at least for UFC.
Yeah, Cody, we just did the introduction of the biography of Forrest Griffin. Do you have anything you want to say about that? I know you missed all of us talking about him, but anything that you learned as you were reading? You're muted, Cody.
I said, nope, I'll just leave it right where you guys left it at.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Yancey. That was a good journey. I love learning. I love doing research, and I love specifically learning about sports. So I enjoyed that. We most of today is going to be spent on some data and analytics and things like that. But we wanted to leave what we call a football minute. During last football season, we were doing basketball minutes as the basketball season was going on. So we're going to do a football minute for today. What do we have to say about the first 4 weeks of college football and the first 3 weeks of the NFL? Let's get one or two sentences from each person about something you want to talk about. No responses from anyone necessary, just your thoughts. So 2 sentences from each person. And no order. If you have something to say, jump in.
I'll start off. I think that it's just been more exciting and closer games than as like a kind of. I've been more of a casual fan recently until I jumped into the podcast with you guys, and since then I've noticed like the more I'm paying attention, the more I'm seeing like higher scoring games, closer to within a touchdown or less than a touchdown, to where you gotta watch to the fourth quarter to figure out or watch the fourth quarter to really see how the game was going, and to to get the overall arc of the story. I wasn't able to do that in seasons before, and this year it's been a lot more exciting and able to hold my attention and keep me to the end of the game rather than just wanting to watch highlights. I found myself a lot more into the finishes of the games this year than I have in years previous, just because of the high-powered offenses and even the defensive games have been more exciting than in years past for both leagues.
Yeah, I like that. I think I'll just go off of what I've been watching mostly, which would be the teams that I root for. I'll leave probably the BYU to someone else if they want to talk about that. But Utah is right back at the can Rising play again this week thing. So Kyle Whittingham is possibly the best poker player in college athletics, and it's really annoying for, I think, fan bases. It's really annoying for reporters, and also it's not good for reporters and their jobs either. It can really hurt their reputation if they say one thing and then something else happens. So I just don't like it at all. I do want the league to enforce some type of injury report, but what's different this year than last year for Utah, at least, is it seems to be a lot better to have Isaac Wilson, which is actually Zach Wilson's brother, under center than it was Bryson Barnes and Nate Johnson last year. So Utah seems to have a quarterback still, not Cam Rising talent, but still a quarterback. And then for NFL, the Seahawks are way better than I thought they'd be even at this point. Their defense is astounding, which I guess I should have expected that, with Mike McDonald. Offense is doing pretty well, but it's not fully clicking on all cylinders yet. But if they make that happen, then from as much of an unbiased perspective as I can try to have, then the Seahawks seem to be a real contender.
Yeah. I'd like to very quickly respond to a couple of things. The Seahawks are the best defense in the NFL through 3 weeks. However, the three quarterbacks they faced through 3 weeks are Bo Nix in his first rookie start, Jacoby Brissett, and who's the guy for the Dolphins that was subbing for Tua Tagovailoa?
Skylar Thompson.
So, Skylar Thompson. So you got the three worst quarterbacks in the league, essentially. That they have a good one this week in Jared Goff. So we'll see, but they have been impressive for sure. And the NFL requires injury reports, and so I think college should too. So yeah, I agree. I would just say how funny the NFL is. Like, you tongue in cheek, we could say the season is going exactly the way we predicted, right? If the season ended right now, Sam Darnold would be the MVP of the league. And that's funny, just the way we expected. The Seahawks the Seahawks are undefeated. The 49ers are 1-2. It's just the way that we predicted everything to go. And it just goes to show that, yes, there are things that we can take into account. We know the 49ers are a better team than 1-2. We know the Seahawks aren't going to go 17-0. We know these things, but it's early season things are just kind of fun narratives to think about, because we haven't seen the full extent of what the season's going to look like. But at this point, that's the narrative we have to go off of. And so it's fun to think about those funny little instances. And so it just reminds you that there's a reason that you have to play these games, because you really have to see what's going to happen and what you think you knew and what you realize you didn't know. And that's the beauty of sports. Sometimes is you can be as smart as you want, you can be as data driven as you want, and at the end of the day, you don't know anything. So.
And just to add to that real quick, I was thinking about the Steelers. How the Steelers are 3-0 right now with Justin Fields being the quarterback, and the way he's playing, it looks like Russell Wilson might be his backup the whole year.
Yep.
Yeah.
And go ahead, Dustin.
So kind of to play off, Scott, kind of what you're talking about is you call it a little funny thing, and that it's definitely my favorite part of the NFL is that it is so hard to predict who's going to win any game. Doesn't really matter what the matchup is. it's hard to predict it because, the way that the season's been going is teams that we said there's absolutely no chance for them to win. Panthers all of a sudden win by 30. No chance they're going to have. It's a dumpster fire of a season, and the Cardinals, are, what are they, 2-1, 3-0, something like that. And so, it's Cardinals been playing great. Anyway, it's great. It's the fun part of football and what I love about the NFL is you look at 16 games, and if somebody can guess 10 out of those 16 games correctly, that's usually very good. I feel in college football, you look at the top 25, you can probably guess 20 out of 25 correctly. And so I love the NFL for that, is that really any given Sunday for any team, it's hard to predict who's going to win, and so it's going to be a great season the way that it's been so far. And yeah, if you would have asked me at week 3 what 6 teams would be undefeated, I might have been able to guess 2 of them.
Yep, and we'll talk about that a little bit here in a second too. But last thing I want to mention is I had myself a really good cheese beefy burrito crunch the other day, and I ate it the normal way, but it was that was funny to see. Dustin and I talked about that the day before the game. The Kansas State fan talking about that, and then BYU just steamrolled them, and that was impressive. BYU's defense has been really, really good this season. Offense, that was their best offensive output, but they've held some really good offenses. SMU didn't score a touchdown against them, and BYU beat them, and Kansas State didn't score a touchdown either. So they've allowed 1 touchdown all season through 4 games. BYU. So
BYU fed the football backwards to K State the way that guy said he was going to eat that burrito.
Yeah.
That's a tough one to have receipts on the internet for.
That's why you don't do that. I mean, you just say, "I'll be surprised if Kansas State loses." Just leave it at that.
Yeah, right. You don't need to end up with a crazy haircut or a burrito in your butt, dude. Chill out.
Yeah, but that matchup in a few weeks between BYU and Utah might be exciting football. So
yeah, I also wonder if that would be if they're both undefeated, if that would be a college game day type thing.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, our next topic. I've been looking forward to this for a couple of weeks. If you know me at all, and if you know where my career has gone, I'm very interested in numbers. I'm very interested in data. As a journalist, I spent some time as a business writer, and I was digging into financial reports, and I was understanding how financials tell the story of how a company is doing, and I would really dig into that. And so I've loved to do the same thing with a lot of other things, and so I've brought that to play a little bit in analyzing the first quarterback taken in every draft since 1988, since the year I was born. And this is not going to take a whole lot of time. I'm going to go through this pretty quick, or we're going to go through this pretty quickly. But let me share my screen so you can see what I'm referencing. Do you see my spreadsheet here?
Here we are.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So I have, this is the year that they were drafted from 88 all the way down, and the pick that they were taken in. This is the first quarterback taken off the board of each draft, where they played in the college, where they played in the NFL, their college stats, and their pro stats, and just some notes on them. And I thought it might be interesting. I'm not going to talk about every single quarterback. Obviously, we don't have time for that. I'm going to point out a couple. And then at the very end here, I also have some other quarterbacks that were taken in that same draft. And in the blue bold, this is a subjective thing. Is the first quarterback taken the best quarterback to be taken in that draft? And a spoiler alert, less than half were the best quarterback of that draft, taken in that draft. And so just look at that real quick and just get your thoughts as well. When I stop to talk about one in particular, or if you want to talk about one, but what's interesting with the first one is the first quarterback wasn't taken until the third round in 1988. That was Chris Chandler. Shout out to the Colts. He was taken by the Colts and played there for 2 years. He took the Falcons to the Super Bowl, but he was the best in that draft class. But there's not really any competition over here. So, Troy Aikman, first overall pick in 1989 out of UCLA and Oklahoma, technically, played his entire career with the Cowboys and won 3 Super Bowls. So you can say that's pretty much the best quarterback out of that draft. He also doesn't have any competition. So, Jeff George, Heisman Trophy winner as well, first overall pick. No one's ever heard of him. Sorry. And he didn't do anything at all. Neil O'Donnell out of that draft. And some of these I will highlight the. So you took a quarterback here who had 19 and 15 over that college career, and threw more interceptions than he did touchdowns in his college career. So I don't understand what the evaluation was here, especially taking him first overall. But he threw more interceptions than touchdowns in college, and technically he was a little bit better in the NFL than he was in college, but still not great. And then a couple.
You said he won the Heisman that year?
He won the Heisman 2 years before he was drafted. So in
1989. Okay, that makes. I was like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Impressive mediocrity.
So, and then 2 guys that you've never heard of: Dan McGuire out of San Diego State and David Klingler out of Houston were both taken in the first round. No one's ever heard of any one of them. The Cincinnati Bengals will really rue the day they took David Klingler because Brett Favre was available. Actually, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong guy. Dan McGuire. So the Seattle Seahawks will rue the day that they took Dan McGuire because Brett Favre was available. So, yeah. So. Drew Bledsoe, first overall pick out of Washington State. He ended up being the best quarterback in that draft. He went to a Super Bowl. Mark Brunell was also taken in that draft. But you can see Drew Bledsoe went only 14 and 16, though, in college. So also lost more games than he won. Heath Shuler out of Tennessee. No one's really ever heard of him. He actually became a senator from the state of Tennessee after his NFL career. And Trent Dilfer was actually available, but he was probably the best quarterback. Steve McNair in 95, the best quarterback of that draft. His numbers are just insane, by the way. 30 and 12 record, 122 touchdowns against 39 interceptions, his career in college. But he played for FCS Alcorn State. So he's the only FCS player to be taken number 1 from the quarterback position. So that's kind of
brought down by a mentally ill waitress.
Yep, there you go.
Wait.
R.I.P.
Sorry,
yeah, for sure.
What, Cody?
I just said one question. With Steve McNair, says 1,3 is in that round 1 pick 3.
Yeah, third overall pick. Yes.
So he's not the first one then, or the only one.
He was the first quarterback. That's what this is going on. There were two players picked above him, but neither one were quarterbacks.
Gotcha. So, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Tony Banks in 96. Very few people are going to know who that is, but he did win a Super Bowl as the backup for Trent Dilfer for the Baltimore Ravens. So, Jim Druckenmiller out of Virginia Tech in 97. And too bad that Jake Plummer was available, I guess, for the 49ers, but he went 20 and 4. So he was really good college quarterback. He started 1 whole game his entire NFL career. So, and then you get Peyton Manning in 1998. Another spoiler alert: he's going to be the best quarterback of this whole list, of the first quarterback taken. University of Tennessee, 39 and 6 record during his college career, 4-year college career, 89 touchdowns against 33 interceptions. And then obviously he had 14 Pro Bowls, went to 4 Super Bowls, won 2 of them. Definitely the best top quarterback taken, at least in the last 37 years or whatever it was. Tim Couch, first overall pick out of Kentucky, 16 and 18 college career. So whatever you want to think about that. But he had a huge arm, 74 touchdowns, 35 interceptions. Chad Pennington in 2000 out of Marshall. These numbers are inflated. He had 100 touchdowns against 30 interceptions. Is really, really good. He had a guy he got to throw to named anyone?
Randy Moss.
Randy Moss at college. So yeah, he had a little bit easier time throwing the ball to that guy. But Tom Brady was taken in this draft, by the way, back in the year 2000. So
There's actually a few. There's a couple good. Mark Bolger was okay. Chris Redman, no, never mind.
Yeah, just Brady. Pennington was good too, but it wasn't Tom Brady, obviously. And then Michael Vick in '01. This is one that is subjective because I didn't pick him as my number one, as my best quarterback of this draft class, because Drew Brees was in this class too. So, so you can debate about that a little bit, but Vick was amazing. 22-2 college record. Only threw 20 touchdown passes in his career, but mainly because he ran the ball a lot. So you can talk about what is a quarterback. He was obviously the first one taken in a long time that was primarily because of his athleticism, not really his arm. So
was that was that around the time that Virginia Tech was like national championship type of team?
they would have gone to the national championship game if they wouldn't have lost the ACC championship game to Miami. So
a crazy stacked Miami team, though. We gotta, I mean,
Frank Gore,
crazy stacked.
Yeah,
he could go on for. I mean, everybody was from Miami that year.
Yep. David Carr out of Fresno State to become the Texans quarterback. He was okay in college, 18-8, 61-20 touchdown interception ratio. Obviously, in college, he ended up throwing more interceptions than he did touchdowns in his college career, and was sacked more than any other quarterback ever. But David Garrard in that class, so not a strong class. Carson Palmer in 03. 30-20 record, but he won a Heisman as well. 3 Pro Bowls, probably the best quarterback come out of that class. Peyton's little brother, Eli. This was a stacked quarterback class. That Eli Manning was not the top one, even though he won 2 Super Bowls. You also have Phillip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger in this class. And so I chose Roethlisberger, again, as a subjective. It could be really any of those 3. But Alex Smith, the top overall pick out of Utah in 05. He went 22-2 and 47-8 touchdown interception ratio in college. He was a consensus number 1 overall pick, but Aaron Rodgers was taken a little bit later in that draft. So Aaron Rodgers is clearly the better NFL quarterback, but Alex Smith had better college stats, and so you kind of got to think about that too. So. Vince Young out of Texas, the Heisman Trophy. No, he didn't win the Heisman. He won the national championship that year. Jay Cutler was his competition. So not a lot there. Jamarcus Russell, the busts of all busts, unless we're counting Bryce Young now. So we'll talk about that later. But Jamarcus Russell had a huge arm, obviously. He could throw it 100 yards. He could throw it from one end of the field to the other. But he could miss by an entire field length too. So it's more than about power; it's about accuracy. But really, there was no one else. So
Trent was okay, Trent Edwards, but I mean that was Priest Holmes and all the guy Dante Hall more helping him to shine than anything in his pro career.
Yep. Matt Ryan, the 3rd overall pick in 08 out of Boston College, 30-9 college record. Joe Flacco was also taken in that draft, so you can think about which one is a better college quarterback. Matthew Stafford, 1st overall pick in 09 out of Georgia, 30-9 as well. Threw a lot of interceptions in college, but he's clearly been the best of his class, even though it hasn't included anybody else. Mark Sanchez, maybe. So,
I mean, if you're talking about coaches with their girlfriends' faces tattooed wearing your jersey on them, Mark Sanchez is in the lead.
There you go. Sam Bradford, the top overall pick in 2010. Colt McCoy, Tim Tebow, that draft. There's not a lot. But Bradford didn't do much, especially in the NFL. He flamed out. But Cam Newton, the top overall pick in 2011, didn't play. He only played 14 college games, but he won them all. He won 14-0. So talk about that. But you talk about it as well. What kind of college tape do you have if you're only watching 14 games from a guy in college? And then a lot of guys, including Andy Dalton and Colin Kaepernick, that came out in that draft. Andrew Luck in 2012, he could be that bold-faced blue. This was a tough call for me too. He was considered the best quarterback to come out since Peyton Manning in that draft. He was everything. He was considered that generational talent. I picked Russell Wilson out of this draft. There was several picks later, but it's really close. I only picked that because Russell Wilson has a Super Bowl championship. Well, no one else does, but it's really close. EJ Manuel, Bills might want to forget about him out of Florida State. Especially, I mean, Geno Smith was really the only other guy, and he's the best quarterback to come out of that class. Blake Bortles out of UCF in 2014 had a really good college career, 56 touchdowns and 19 interceptions, but didn't do well in college. Derek Carr was in that draft. Jimmy G. Jameis Winston, the first overall pick in 2015. And yes, he's probably the best quarterback in that class because it's Marcus Mariota, Garrett Grayson, and Sean Mannion to compare with. So, and Jameis Winston played 28 games and went 27-1 in his college career at Florida State. That's pretty impressive. Won a Heisman his freshman year. So, Jared Goff, the first overall. This was also very hard for me to make that call because you have Dak Prescott in that draft too. So, I'm not sure.
Carson Wentz was all right.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mitchell Trubisky, the second overall pick in 2017, out of North Carolina, went 19-8, 41 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. He had a great college stats. This is going to be he's always going to be compared with that guy, Patrick Mahomes, who came out a few picks later. So, yeah, the Bears will always be thinking about what could have been. But it's something I wanted to talk about when I'm finished with this. Would Patrick Mahomes, would he do anything the same that he's been doing if he was with the Bears, if he was drafted then because he was drafted with the Chiefs? Or would Mitchell Trubisky have had a better career playing under Andy Reid? So you got to think about that too. And I want to get your thoughts about that in a second. But Baker Mayfield in 2018, Lamar Jackson was taken later in that draft too. Kyler Murray, probably the best quarterback to come out of that draft in 2019. Daniel Jones, Gardner Minshew. I mean, not much there. Joe Burrow had a ridiculous college career, 25-3 record, 78-11 touchdown interception ratio at LSU, won a Heisman, and immediately became a great quarterback in the NFL as well. Trevor Lawrence, not exactly the same, although a great college career, but he hasn't been the same kind of special that Joe Burrow has been. Kenny Pickett, the first quarterback taken in 2020. That was a really low quarterback draft, but Brock Purdy was taken with that very last pick of the draft, and he's been the best quarterback so far out of that class. Last two, Bryce Young, what sparked this whole conversation? What are the top picks to do horrible? The 24-4 record, 80-12 touchdown interception ratio. His numbers in college were fantastic, but you're playing with Alabama. You're playing with everyone as a future NFL player. And so how does that come into context? 2-16 in his career right now as a starter, and 11 touchdowns, 13 interceptions so far. Just has been horrible, really. CJ Stroud obviously has been the guy. And so far this year, Caleb Williams, 30-10 record, 93 touchdowns to 14 interceptions. Again, a crazy number of stats there. But so far, he hasn't thrown a touchdown in his NFL career yet through 3 games. And Jaden Daniels has looked every bit the franchise quarterback for the Washington Commanders. You really think about the Bears what they think right now. You want to stick with Caleb Williams, obviously, but Jaden Daniels has looked otherworldly for the Commanders. So, okay, so I ran through that fairly quickly. What do you guys have to say about how we evaluate quarterbacks, or obviously it really depends what systems you go into and all that too.
I guess just real quick, a question. I thought, what was Johnny Manziel not taken as the first quarterback in his draft?
Yeah.
No, Johnny Manziel is. I put him in here. He is. Where'd you go, Johnny? Right here. Blake Bortles was taken with a third pick. I think Johnny Manziel was maybe 9, 10, 11, somewhere in there.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, he was like third round. The NFL, a lot of NFL teams were appropriately concerned about his party attitude, and the Browns took a chance on him and lost.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I think my as far as evaluating quarterbacks, my thought is number one, you're never really gonna know. Okay, you're never really gonna know until you get them out there on the field and you play with them. I mean, that's the number one thing. You're never really gonna know. But as far as the best thing to do is in my opinion, is the schools that don't have the NFL roster, like Alabama and Georgia. I'm not saying you can't take a quarterback from them, but it's just so hard to see what's really good and what's really not. Kind of going back to this Bryce Young thing, he was throwing to receivers and tight ends who were going to be playing in the NFL, who were great, and he had an offensive line who were, NFL talent. So, I think especially for teams like that, I'd be really wary, and I'd go with that mind. And I think that other quarterbacks of other teams that, have to kind of play better football is a better idea. But no matter what, I think you should always sit the rookie quarterback for at minimum half the year, if not the first season. Rare exceptions like Jaden Daniels or Joe Burrow happen, but it's rare.
I mean, nothing could have looked worse for Bryce Young than when Andy Dalton comes out and plays a great game and beats the Raiders by 20 points. So at that point, you say, okay, yeah, Bryce Young was the problem.
Yep.
So,
yep. He proved that they have the weapons.
I do think that it's interesting to point out, Scott, you said that this is, roughly, but, less than half have been mediocre or worse.
15 of 37. Yeah.
So,
15 of 37 I chose as the best player to come out of that draft, a little less than half.
Yeah, so more than half, mediocre or worse. I look at this, and yeah, you do have some blue here in the last 15 years, but there's also a lot of names that people don't remember or think of as not great. And even some of these blue names are a little bit questionable. Kyler Murray, Trevor Lawrence, last couple seasons, things like that. Joe Burrow, even the last couple seasons, that's struggled. And so I watched something. I don't remember if I shared it with you, but it was Tom Brady talking about quarterbacks. And he said, you don't have college programs anymore. You have college teams. Talked about when he went to Michigan, he was there for 4 or 5 years. I mean, he didn't play the first 2 years. His job was to study the program and then come in and play after in his 3rd, 4th, even 5th year. And then again, he was drafted by New England. He didn't play his first year. He studied the program. He learned the system and then came in later, after Bledsoe got injured and was able to play within that system. And in today's football landscape, that doesn't exist. These quarterbacks, basically any player, but quarterbacks especially, are like really hoping that the puzzle piece that they are fits in with the system of a school in their first try, 1 or 2 years. And if it doesn't fit in, they're going to transfer to another team and try to fit in with that system. And so a lot of times these great quarterbacks that we see in college, it just happens to be the right puzzle piece fit. They just snug right into that system. You take them out of that system and it just doesn't work. And the NFL is struggling to figure out, okay, do I need to evolve my system to fit this quarterback, or how do I find a quarterback that's going to fit my system? And so development is not happening. Instead, it's puzzle piece. They got the right edges. You got to fit in the right thing, and instead you need to work on development and getting these players shaped in the right way in order to fit the system. To make a comment, Scott, on what you said with Patrick Mahomes, would he been as great in Chicago as in Kansas City? I would say absolutely not. No, looking at some stats this season, I saw Patrick Mahomes has the fastest pass rate this season. He gets rid of the ball faster than any other quarterback in the league. That's not Patrick Mahomes. That's Andy Reid. you could probably look at stats similar 10, 15 years ago. Tom Brady would have been that same way. He'd be the fastest giver to the ball. Peyton Manning, fastest giver to the ball. These systems that really play well to really make quarterbacks look great. And so these quarterbacks here that have fallen off, I'm sorry, I know I'm talking a lot. I think you can blame the system just as much as you can the quarterback. The system did not allow them to be successful, and there needed to be more patience, more development, and better scouting.
Like those comments, and I want your take on the second part of that equation. Would Mitchell Trubisky have been a better quarterback if he was drafted by Kansas City and played in the Andy Reid system? So,
better than he was in Chicago, but he'd still be no Patrick Mahomes. I don't see that. I think that Patrick has a certain style about him that fits in that quick pass, lots of cross, lots of movement that Trubisky just didn't have that.
Yeah.
I like that assessment. I agree with you. I think we're trying to 3D print the style of football, if that's the analogy that I can use to piggyback on what you were saying, Dustin. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. That was a great way to assess what Tom Brady was saying and then apply it to this conversation. And I also agree with that everything's condensed now. It's all much faster than it used to be. Like, even as a sports fan, it's like you would watch a kid grow up in college, be curious if he stays the third year or not or whatever. But they almost never switch colleges every year. You know what I mean? And now we're kind of moving into that, almost like the way it was a shock to the system when you let high schoolers go to the NBA. You know what I mean? Straight from high school to the NBA. I think that we're not there yet because physically they know it would be an abomination to send kids to do that against pros. And just as adults with children, I wouldn't want my 18-year-old faced with that, dude. No, not a chance, not knowing what I know about the sport. So I agree with those things. I think what happens with the hype train of the quarterback that was on the best team that won the national championship or whatever, what makes them get drafted high is more media than anything. It has to do with football. I think it has far less to do with football than it has to do with the media projection of what this person could be, which is all. If you talk to an actual football coach about what this kid could be, like, it depends on the level, of course, but if you ask a high school football coach, what's this quarterback going to be? He's going to say tow truck driver, not NFL quarterback. And so the people who are evaluating these college-aged men to go into the NFL, man, it's a crapshoot. There's no way to know if this system is going to fit a person. There are indicators, and people get paid tons of money to know that stuff. But I think we put a whole lot of stock into what these guys did when they played in college, and it's a whole different sport when they're in the pros, and it's so hard to predict whether or not you can accurately assess if this human being can deal with this pressure and these kind of changes, how fast they can adapt. So, wow, thanks, Scott, for you put a ton of time into this, or probably for you, I don't know if you do this and wake up and you've typed out an entire spreadsheet, if that happens in your dreams or what, but I appreciate all the time that it took to put these numbers together, dude. And I just think that to answer the question overall of like, how do we predict these guys? Do they do as good as we think they're going to do? That is so hard to answer, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's probably the most frustrating thing for NFL scouts and NFL teams that, sometimes it works and a lot of times it doesn't. It's almost a 50-50 dice flip at this point. Looking at, I mean, it's less than that. Just because you're blue here doesn't mean you're a great quarterback. It just means that you're better than the other trash that also came out in the draft. So, like it, out of these, how many were actually franchise quarterbacks? Troy Aikman, maybe Drew Bledsoe. I don't know. Like Steve McNair, obviously Peyton Manning, Michael Vick was for a little while, Eli Manning, Carson Palmer. I guess you can count as well. Matt Ryan, Matthew Stafford, Cam Newton for a little bit, Andrew Luck. I wouldn't quite put Jared Goff in the conversation yet. And maybe Joe Burrow. So 12 out of 37, maybe a third, a little less than a third. And like you're right. It's so based on the system that you're entering into, and if you're drafting a guy number 1 overall, you kind of want to tailor the system to what he can do. But you can only do that so much when you have 10 other guys on your offense that are already there, that are doing something that works for the offensive coordinator, for the coach, for all that. And the last thing I wanted to point out is there are some quarterbacks, and the only one I'll point out right now is Baker Mayfield, that went from a really bad system for him to a system that is working for him in Tampa Bay. Uh, Now that the offensive coordinator is left, but he's still been doing okay. So that's an example of flaming out in one system that you didn't do well, but getting a chance in another system that you're proving that, hey, you're actually maybe as good as they thought you were. It's just the system sucked for you. So, and it happens over here too. Previously, maybe Sam Darnold is in that situation right now that we've talked about. Certainly, Geno Smith has been in Seattle versus where he was drafted in New York. I mean, we see it all over the place. It's not just first overall quarterbacks, but it is something to think about. And like to the end of days, it's probably going to drive scouts crazy because they know they can only put so much work in, and at the end of the day, it's going to come down to a coin flip sometimes. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out to the Colts reputation with Peyton Manning. He had one of the worst seasons of all time.
yeah,
That's a fact.
30 interceptions, I believe, that season. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that should be like I mean, every GM should know that and be aware of that and say, like, it doesn't matter if it's our generational talent, Caleb Williams, for example. You should almost have an expectation that there's going to be more growing pains than success. You should have that expectation, and I feel like sometimes they do, but a lot of times it doesn't seem like they think that. I mean, I guess with Bryce Young, should he have been benched already? There could be a debate for one way or another. I think he probably should have been, but some people would probably say no, not yet. He still needs development, but that would be sitting behind someone else. And I wanted to just kind of go off of what Yancey said, like the media. I think that when you're you're the first one on the board, and you're looking at what would fit in your system the best. It's so tempting though to take what the media shows you. I mean, imagine the Bears being like, I think we actually need to go with whatever else they need, instead of Caleb Williams. But it would be how do I explain that? Just a massive risk, I guess, is really what I'm trying to say is, and I don't think they can do that. So I think they fall into that trap too, the media. If that makes sense. I'm not sure if it does, but.
No, Cody, I think I agree with your comments a lot. As well as challenge you on one thing, but with the media, a couple years when Zach Wilson was doing the combine, ESPN got hold of one highlight of one throw that he made, and they played that all over and say, wow, he is shooting up the draft boards. And it was that throw where he's running left and he chucks it 40 yards down the field. The only problem is there's absolutely no rushers, and he has a receiver that's not being covered, and he can just run under the ball, and it was deceptive. And somehow that shot him up the draft board. And I don't see how professional football analyst could look at that and say, wow, yeah, I can imagine the defense there, and he got it back. So I don't get that. And so the media really pushed that. And then Cody, you just said it a little while ago, and it's been said a lot about how Caleb Williams' generational talent. And I was like, which Caleb Williams? This guy sucked at USC. He was not. He was not generational talent. He was not a great college quarterback. He could not win games.
Yeah, and I agree. That's why I was like generational talent with the quotes.
The numbers do tell a little bit different of a story. I mean, 93 touchdowns to 14 interceptions is pretty dang good. The wins and losses being at USC isn't quite as good for sure. 30-10. If you're at USC, as good as they were, you should be like 38-2 or whatever it is. So, but yeah, there's pieces of that you look at which number is the best one to look at. I mean, completion percentage, that might be one to look at a little bit harder. But then again, I mean, you see Joe Burrow, 68.8%. Currently, his 68% completion rate in the NFL is an NFL record. And so that has transferred 68.8 to 68%. Maybe that's something you can look at a little bit more. But again, then you go back to, hey, he's throwing to Jamar Chase and he's throwing to Justin Jefferson. Like he's throwing to these all-star wide receivers behind an all-star offensive line. So again, you get into that conversation. Like you need to somehow have a vacuum where you put these guys in.
Yeah, and just as one last shout out, I know we're probably going over on this segment. Caleb Williams was good as a quarterback. And you have to think about USC when he was there. Their defense was atrocious. Their defense was horrible. USC's defense right now is doing really good. And so you'd have to think about, what would Caleb Williams be like on the USC team with a defense? That may have been a team that went to the playoffs. That may have been a team that would have played in the national championship. But of course, we would never know because their defense was led by the Grinch, literally. So,
yeah. Very last thing, unless you guys have any comments on this, but one of you, and I can't remember, Cody, I think, talked about Bryce Young. What should have been the right approach? Did the Panthers fail him? Is that what we're looking at here? Because by all accounts, he should probably have learned the last 2 years sitting behind watching Andy Dalton lead that team. And maybe he would be better next year for that. But maybe his confidence and his talent is completely shot from now on. So did the Panthers fail him by putting him out there first day rather than have him learn behind a guy who's been doing it for 13 years? So,
yeah, I think that they should always sit a rookie for a first season. I mean, they all need it. It doesn't matter how good they were in college. NFL is just another level.
Yeah.
Yeah, to go along and agree with Cody, you don't want me fighting or sparring with the white belt in class, do you? Like, what do you do? Let that dude roll around with somebody who's going to not understand things too. I'm going to feed him elbows. Don't do that to him. And that's all the NFL is going to do to rookies. Like, it's like, we're crazy and we're good at this thing. Don't give us somebody who doesn't understand yet. It's our job to show them they're not ready. And so I think that just throwing these guys to the wolves it's a bad idea. At some point you want to see them tested, but I'm definitely in the camp with Cody that let your scrubs beat up on them and let them experience that first. So that way they have a realistic engagement of what this is going to be like when they take on the real guys. You know what I mean? Because college just doesn't give you that same perspective. It's like bullying somebody. You don't understand until they punch you in the face that you shouldn't have bullied them. You know what I mean? Like when you see the difference in talent of somebody that's willing to fight versus somebody that's not, like it's just completely different. It turns people's worlds upside down. That's what's happening to a lot of these rookies that are like, whoa, like when I was playing against these guys, I was so fast and smart looking and I made all the right choices. But now you're playing with people that are 3 times the experience and 3x everything. and they just can't compete. And I think that like you were saying, Scott, diminishes their talent in a lot of cases, or not talent, but confidence. And those are directly linked with each other.
You just think about it. The Vikings were essentially forced to sit J.J. McCarthy because he got injured, and Sam Darnold is in his place. They'll probably never admit that that's what they were going to do because obviously it looks like a genius move to put Sam Darnold in there, but he probably was going to be a backup to J.J. McCarthy. And what would the Vikings be doing at this point with him? So just something to think about. Yeah.
And let's not forget that's basically what happened to Joe Burrow, right? Year one, he got injured. I think just a couple of games in, had to sit the whole season, came back in. So that could have been why he played so well.
Yeah. Okay, let me stop share this. Also, I have a question for you guys. Was that worth it enough for me to do like running backs next for a future one and see how they compare, or wide receivers, or whatever it is, or is it just such a different animal for quarterbacks that it should be left alone with quarterbacks? Like, what are you guys thinking?
If you feel like doing it, I'll talk running backs, but I feel like running backs are far more subjective to the style that you like, or you could just make it, if it's just about the numbers, it's Emmitt Smith and F your mama. Like, I mean, you know what I mean? Barry Sanders. There's like 5 guys that you could really talk about if it's just numbers.
I'll think about
I
it.
just agree with Yancey.
Yeah, with most other positions, in fact, including quarterback, the system is so important, to have like quarterback included. And so, it may be interested to say, hey, the Bears have been drafting first overall, like, so often over the last 20 years. What is it with their system that struggles? That's a harder thing to diagnose, but that may be something that we want to talk about is these teams struggle to find a system that's effective.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Dustin, I'm turning it over to you to talk about Woj real quick.
So news in the basketball world, Woj or Woj, however it's pronounced, Adrian Wojnarowski was the NBA beat reporter partner with ESPN for probably the last 20 years or so. Basically, any piece of NBA news that you'd ever heard came from Woj. It says, according to Woj, this is happening. According to Woj, this is happening. And so, anyway, so he didn't, sorry, I realized I didn't preface this. He's not dead. He's just retiring, right? He didn't die. He's going to be the NBA the basketball general manager at his alma mater. I forget which school.
St. Bonaventure.
St. Bonaventure, yeah. And so stepping down from ESPN's position there to do that. And so I just wanted to, kind of do a shout out that every piece of NBA news that I've ever had has basically come from Woj. I think a few that I remember specifically was when Kevin Durant signed with the Warriors, and reading that from Woj and just being so mad. And, Woj just put it just kind of deadpan. Kevin Durant signed with the Warriors, and I just imagine him also just throwing his hands up like, this is the dumbest thing ever. And so that's how I felt. Any comments for you or any memories on big NBA drops, NBA news that came from Woj from anybody, or just comments in general?
For me, 2 memories, and I'm going to go in reverse order. The most recent one that really impacted was when LeBron went to the Lakers, and I got that from Woj. I don't know how to pronounce it either, I guess. The second one was he was my source of information when Kobe Bryant died. So actually Dustin was the first one, and then I went to watch to confirm that. So yeah, those 2. And he had only been with ESPN since 2017. Before that, he was with Yahoo Sports for a long time. 2007, I think, so 10 years before that. And then he was a sports journalist before that. But he had been with ESPN for 7 years before making that that retirement switch and becoming a general manager. So yeah, he was definitely the important news guy for the NBA, as we've said in our text before, the Adam Schefter of the NBA. So.
In all transparency and honesty, I had no idea who that was or what his retirement importance was. If I wasn't in a wild text thread with some sheriffs, I wouldn't have known Kobe died until everybody else did. Woo! That's a joke. And then let's see. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know who that was until Dustin was saying he was retiring. I did get the ESPN notification that he was, but I probably have received news from him and just didn't know because I didn't. Like, I'm assuming Ariel Helwani. He's like the Ariel Helwani of the NBA. And that's the news guy that Dana White hates for telling everybody what's going on that he's not supposed to out, you know?
Yeah. I'm kind of in the same boat as you, Yancey. I didn't know who that was, and had to get confirmation from both Dustin and Scott on that. But I do just want to I think over the years I've learned more and more about the importance of the roles as reporters. Something that I'm sure Scott's known of for decades now. But something that I've learned recently is the sports that we love grow so much because of the reporters. Because of everything they're reporting, everything they're doing, they help the fans grow. They help that fan base develop. They help the sport grow because of that. And so I think it's super important that someone of this caliber, and I think kind of like as you guys said, the Adam Schefter of the NBA. I can only imagine that he's not only changed the world of reporting for NBA, but he has single-handedly kind of helped the NBA grow. I can only imagine. And so basically I would just say thanks to him for all of that.
Cool. Okay. We're off to Cody now for PTI questions. So Cody, you're in charge.
Okay. I have 4. Do you think we're going to meet all those, you think?
Depends how much discussion we have. So let's just start.
Okay. All right. So let's first start with this one and this. So Tyler Huntley, we'll start with that one. Tyler Huntley is expected to get the start in Miami. He was literally just signed off of I think the Ravens practice squad or something. Just Browns practice squad just 2 weeks ago or something. Because obviously both Tua is out and then Skylar Thompson has a rib injury. I'm not sure if it's a hot take or not, but my take is that if he continues that starting position, he's going to win at minimum the next 3 of 4 games with Miami. Let me hear what you guys have to say about that.
Cody, did you look at who they were playing over their next 3 games?
Mm-hmm.
You did. Okay. So you hit that from your take. I see. So for everyone else's transparency, their next 3 games, the Titans on Monday night, the Patriots, and the Colts. So Cody, if they don't win at least 2 of those 3 games, then Tyler Huntley shouldn't play football. So,
Okay.
So go ahead, Dustin.
No, Scott, I was going to agree with you and, take the joke. Like, I think the Dolphins could start Jeff Saturday and be able to win those 3 games. So,
hey, what's with all this Indiana talk? Come on now. Jeff Saturday? That's Jeff Saturday, Dustin?
They could start Steve Gleason. Is that one worse?
Yeah, it's Cody. It's a good take. I understand it comes from the heart of a Utah fan that you're wanting to see this happen. Yeah, the Dolphins, they're a mess, but with Tua in control, they were okay. And Tyler Huntley he's not quite at Tua's level, but he's not far behind. And so I think that if that's the only thing they're missing is a competent quarterback, they should win all 3 of those games. They should. They play the Cardinals after that. That's a little harder. But they should win those 3 games if quarterback is the only thing they're lacking. Tyler Huntley is a placeholder. Like as soon as Tua is cleared, provided that he will ever be cleared, he's starting immediately. And so Tyler Huntley's a placeholder. Even if Tyler Huntley wins all 3 of those games, it doesn't matter. Tua is playing because again, he should win those 3 games as a starter.
Yeah, I think that the hurdle, and I think Huntley is probably better positioned than Thompson was, is the complexity of the Miami offense that, they have a great run game. And if you can just hand it off to Achane every play, like that's fine. But their passing game, they have a little bit of complexity there because their receivers are small. They're fast, but they're small. And so you got to have some complexity there in the passing game. That may be a little bit difficult for him to learn that system and adapt to that. But if they can keep the running game going, then the pressure's off of Huntley.
I don't know a whole lot about Tyler Huntley to say yes or no either way. I agree with Cody that they'll win these 3 games, but just you guys talking about Indiana's got me fired up. They're losing that game to the Colts. Mark my words. I don't care. The Dolphins are losing that game. I don't care if the Colts lose every other game. They're going to win that game on my passion alone.
We're going to check up on that one in particular. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I make sure to season all of my words so they taste good later.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Okay.
Cody? So recently there was some news about, I think it's Matthew Sluka, I think his name is. He's a UNLV quarterback. He has decided to pull out from being the starting quarterback of UNLV because he's not getting his NIL compensation the way he thought it would be. In other words, holdouts, contract holdout is basically what it is. Now it's happening in college football. The question I guess I'm thinking about is, are other players going to see him doing this and be like, oh, I can do that? I'm going to start doing that now as well and start holding out just like the NFL players doing, for a new contract. And what is that going to do to college football? It's more of a good question, I guess, just a topic of discussion.
In my opinion, the answer is yes. And I hate it with every being of my heart. So if you want me to explain that, maybe I'm a traditionalist that loves the way that college football was. But at the same time, it's complicated because I do want these players to get paid because they are representing their school and they're making a lot of money for their school. They deserve to get paid. So that's where I stand on that issue. But there's still an element of college football passion that has been removed from the game because of an NIL, and I hate it.
Getting old is fun and confusing. I agree with Scott 100%. I think, look, you're changing the game I love, but they do need to make money. Like, it's hard to be in college. It's harder to be a student athlete. So pay them for what they're doing. But also, like, this kind of prima donna stuff makes me be like, well, let him hold out. Don't give him no money. Tell him to go somewhere else. Who cares? Whatever. You think, oh, you're all of a sudden irreplaceable? Get out of here, Beyonce. You know what I mean? It's not a problem. And so I think that kind of stuff will work itself out organically. And then the rest will either say, hey, that's a good idea, or not take a knee the rest of the season because they saw that guy lost his job. So it'll kind of play out like that. And we'll see, okay, do you really think you're talented enough to hold up the rest of the team that you deserve all this money? Or should we say, all right, figure it out somewhere else, dude. We're not paying you that. We told you what we'd pay you. You asked for too much, and that's when life bites you and gives you a little slice of humble pie,
Yeah. UNLV, who does he think he is?
Thank you. Thank
They
you,
are
Justin.
They are 3-0, but
Okay.
UNLV?
Yeah.
Let them at least get as many wins as they have letters in their acronym.
Yeah, Scott, like you, it kind of has a bad taste in the mouth about that, but I also think, when you're getting paid NIL money, you're not there to get an education. That's not why you're going to that school. You're not a student athlete. You're an athlete that is required to have a tutor do all your tests for you. Like that's what you're there for. So it's a little bit different in that way. So, and it's interesting with all the sports, there's always a team that's willing to give you the money you want, no matter what. And so these players, when in college, have that position. It's available to them to make those kind of demands because somebody's going to give them that money if you don't. And just because of the supply and demand of sports payroll, if you would, it is in such a way that works out that way. So I expect it's going to work. I expect they're going to pay him, and he's gonna show up and keep playing, and probably nothing's going to change that way. And Cody, yes, I expect it to happen more. I expect that. I think it's happening already more than we think. That there's these players that are changing schools, and they're not changing schools because they thought they had a better system. Changing schools because somebody said, "Hey, I'll give you more money over here," or they said, "Hey, will you give me $3 million for this?" And they say, "No." Okay, well, that school's going to do it. And they go that way. So yeah, it's already happening. It's going to happen more.
Yeah, and you wonder about a guy from UNLV. I would imagine that unless he's a world breaker, he's amazing, and I don't know if he is or not. But you imagine it's gonna move down, not up. He's gonna be playing for Northern Arizona next year. So, yeah.
And to be completely fair, all of this shit was happening way before we knew about it. It was just that you had to be extremely talented to get the money that we are all privy to understanding is getting paid to these guys before you're going to have access. So the fact that guys who aren't super talented can now afford to exist and still play football is a good thing overall. I want to make sure that I put that out because it was always like that. Ask any, now that these pros from 15 years ago are going on podcasts and telling you like, oh yeah, for sure they were paying me because they can't get anybody sued or fired. Like it doesn't matter. But we know that this stuff was happening before. I think now that it's more transparent and everybody's getting a piece of the pie, that is a good thing. And I want to make sure that I display that's the stance that I take on it.
Give Reggie Bush his trophies back.
Let's go. And who's that? Oh man, Chris Webber. Didn't his career got kind of hinked up with some money stuff, right? That whole Fab Five team had some problems with that.
They couldn't count though. They didn't know how many timeouts they had left. So
Hey, that was a fair joke. That was fair. That was good. That was quick, dude.
That was good.
Okay, Cody, next one.
All right. So we're gonna go with this one. So, and then I'll try to explain it all as well. So brands such as like more like high scale brands, and specifically football is one thing, and probably other sports too. But example being Georgia or Alabama, Ohio State. Think brands like that. They don't have to recruit. They don't have to recruit. Almost all of the schools do need to recruit. Let me explain why I feel that way. All of the work has already been done prior to that. When a talented player, it doesn't matter what position they are, talented, they're 5-star, and they realize that they're 5-star, usually they're going to say, okay, well, I'm going to go to Georgia because that's going to give me the best access. And so that's going to give these schools, these programs, basically first picking. Okay, well, I want you, I want you, I want you, and I want you. Well, everyone else has to work at it and say, go out and actually recruit. When these schools, these programs don't do that. They just come flocking to them. So my take is, as of currently right now, Ryan Day, Kirby Smart, Kalen DeBoer, brands like that, maybe Double Sweeney, I don't know. They don't recruit. They just let people come to them.
I'd have to say That's like walking up to a bodybuilder and saying, "Well, you only look like that because you woke up jacked today, and like you might go, like you're gonna go to the gym later." Like, nah, bro. Alabama, USC, all these programs have been in the gym every other day. You just weren't hanging out with them. So yes, recruiting's gonna come easy. Yes, everybody wants to go there, but that's because they did the work to be the guy that you want to be around to get success from, and understand success is bred around here. And I think like it's a to be a little obtuse of your point of view, it's a little shallow to say, well, they don't even have to recruit now because they're so good. It's like, well, we're so good because we kicked ass for 30 years. Who's messing with it? Of course you want to come here. There's no competition. We proved that, and we'll continue to prove it. But as soon as you lose that mindset is when those programs slide down, because there's like three super important people to that program that share that belief that, look, this is going to be my legacy for the next 30 and then 30 after I leave this place, that this is how we do this thing. And without that, you don't have anybody giving a care about what you're doing. And you can make any school, New Mexico State could be the next Notre Dame if a dude who comes along like Lou Holtz or whatever that has this mindset that takes them on into new like different eras of football or basketball or whatever the sport or tradition is. So to just say these guys don't have to recruit is a little unfair to the work done before at those schools that made them a dynasty, because otherwise no one would care if they weren't a dynasty. You know what I mean?
I agree a little bit with both of you here, because it's not that recruiting has changed; it's that the manner of recruiting has changed. It's now NIL, right? It's uh, because you still have to put in the work. These guys, Georgia is not on such a higher platform than Ohio State. It's that, hey, Georgia, are you going to pay me $5 million? Okay, Ohio State will. And so it's the way that it's changed. And going to Yancey's point, I agree with you as well. And 2 points I wanted to make with there: Boise State is still a top tier recruiter because of the work that was done back in 2006, 7, 8. Even though they're not on that level anymore, talent wise, they're still a very respected college football program because of the work that was done 20 years ago now. And so it does have a lot to do with that as well. And then you mentioned a name, Cody, that I want to correct you on something. Dabo Swinney is historically been so anti-transfer portal that he will not go into it. He will not use transfers at Clemson. He refuses to even go there. He wants Clemson players bred and born. He wants them to commit to Clemson and play there, and he will only use the people that he's recruited to Clemson, and he refuses to go to the transfer portal. That being said, people can transfer out of Clemson, but he doesn't want to bring anyone to Clemson from other schools, and he's so stick in the mud with that. And Clemson has been declining the last 3 years, primarily because of the his lack of recruiting, or his lack of understanding what the new recruiting looks like, which is transfer portal and things like that, transfer portal and NIL. And I think Clemson is going to fall down even further over the next few years unless he decides that he wants to get on board with what the new system looks like.
Yeah. So, Cody, I think I understand what you're saying, and I actually think that the opposite is true. I think that 10, 20 years ago, what you're suggesting was true then. That these top figure teams didn't have to do super major recruiting because they're only competing with each other, right? Georgia, Alabama, Florida, all those different teams, 10, 20 years ago were the top ones, and you're going to get the top talent, and you're only competing with each other. And then these days, kind of like what Scott said, you're having to recruit more heavily and more dynamically than ever before, because Yeah, somebody at Georgia, they say, okay, we know you can get your $3 million anywhere else. Let me tell you what else I can give you. And then there's those little underhand things that we don't talk about that they get. You come to my school, then you get this. You come to my school, we'll make sure you have a fake ID and you can get into all the bars and do this and make sure you got all those special phone numbers and all that stuff. And you have your own lawyer and all to get you out of all that trouble. And so it's all those other things that they got to recruit and they got to pitch and all of that in order to get them to come to school. So I think recruiting happens more now than it did 20 years ago because of the dynamic of NIL.
So just to comment on a few things as well as maybe push back a little bit on a few things. First off, with the answer with your saying, I think that was my point, was that the work's been done previously. That's why they're not doing it now. That's what I was saying. And so now with Dustin, I think you made a good point. I think I was thinking in terms of recruiting straight out of high school. I wasn't thinking of transfer portal, NIL, which the truth is that's really what recruiting is nowadays. So I had to think about that. But in terms strictly of coming out of high school and being recruited by schools that way, that's been done. If the only options for a Nebraska kid is Florida and Cal, they're going to go to Florida. They're going to go. I mean, it's like a no-brainer because of that history, even though they are on the same platform right now. And so that's just kind of the point I was making. But I think you made a really good point on transfer portal and NIL is really what the new look recruiting is. But I think I was thinking more of just out of high school recruiting.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do we have enough time for this last one? What do you guys think?
How much time do we have left, would you say?
We have 7 minutes.
We could probably just each throw some names in. Maybe we wouldn't be able to do everyone having a list type of thing. But
yeah. All right.
So last question is just top 5 head coaches, both NFL and college football. I think, I'll just really quickly throw out my list on college football and then let you guys talk about whatever you want. But the order I have going down the line is Kirby Smart, Steve Sarkisian, Kyle Whittingham, Lane Kiffin, Dan Lanning. That's my thought. And I won't get into the specifics just because of the time. But we can talk about NFL as well. Of course, this is currently not all time, but I'm kind of curious what you guys think as far as the best head coaches. And that can be different ideas. That can be the wins, or that can be development. That can be, who develops NFL talent better, who has won more national championships. And that can be different, I guess, topics of where to discuss or argue or debate is what makes them good. And same with NFL. So I'll just kind of start there and let you guys kind of throw some names in, or we can just talk about a few.
So when I think of great coaching, I think of consistency. And so NFL, it's Andy Reid and Mike Tomlin. Those are the top two. There's John Harbaugh. I'd probably put somewhere maybe number 5 in the top 5 in there, and I'm not sure who I'd put in 3 and 4. And I don't think I know enough names in college to be able to build a list there.
Mm-hmm. The exact same top two in the NFL as Dustin, Reid and Tomlin. I was tempted to put Kyle Shanahan, but not yet. He may get there, but not yet. He's not consistent enough. But yeah, Andy Reid and Mike Tomlin. And I couldn't really. I mean, I could think about the college coaches, but it changes so drastically sometimes based on the program and based on the things like that. And so Kirby Smart comes to mind, yes. And so does Kalen DeBoer for what he's doing at Alabama after Washington. But I'm not going to make a list of 5 for either one, but those are just some names I'll mention.
Yeah, I basically agree with you guys that Tomlin and Reid are the top 2 in the NFL right now. There's there's some argument to be made that they're, but I don't know who you would put up there that is as consistent and makes good decisions in bad moments. Like if you're faced with adversity, this guy makes good choices. Andy Reid is definitely one of those guys. Mike Tomlin is definitely one of those guys. longevity is important to me. So the fact that this wasn't an all-time list made it very difficult for me to like off the top of the head come up with college, especially coaches that I like, because I haven't seen them tested all that long. The Harbaugh brothers, I would say both of them deserve respectively to be on the like current coach list. Um, and then I don't know who my 5 would be, but just tossing those guys in there. And even though he's not coaching, and you said not all time, shout out Cody Dungy. I think he was one of the calmest, coolest coaches to go through crazy like real life stuff and still show up for his team and stuff like that. Being that his son's death and stuff like that. And other than that, I think that's all I would really have. I agree with most of your guys' picks, and I would throw the Harbaugh brothers in there.
Yeah. Okay. We've made good time today. Just as a schedule update for what we're doing the next couple of weeks. Next week, MLB postseason we'll take up probably half of it. Cody, do we know if Bob is coming to that or not?
I haven't reached out to him yet. I can do that
Okay.
ASAP.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, that's okay. We'd love to have him. He knows a lot. But also starting next week, we're doing NBA preview too. And so NBA preview the 3rd, 10th, and 17th, preparing for the 22nd. It won't take all of the time. It will take significantly less time to do the NBA than it did the NFL, significantly, because there's less people to talk about and there's less teams. And so it'll be much smoother. We can cover other topics during those weeks in addition to what we're doing for just the 2 divisions each week. So that's our next 3-week outlook. We'll be covering mostly baseball and basketball for the next 3 weeks, obviously having football minutes in each one as well. But any questions or updates or adjustments to that schedule?
No, I don't think so.
All righty. Well, thanks everyone for a great podcast, and we'll talk next week.